While we share many of the same organ systems as other mammals, our specialized nervous system can be said to be one system that sets us apart. Our nervous system is highly adapted to allow us to think, feel, speak, reason, move, breathe, and basically do anything you can think of doing. It controls and coordinates the rest of our organ systems like the conductor of an orchestra. Just as the conductor makes sure the strings, the pipes, and the reeds stay in harmony, our nervous system helps all of our systems work together to maintain homeostasis. Let's look at what makes up our nervous system and some specific ways it works. Because of the complexity of the nervous system, we can divide it into a few different sections or categories. First, we can divide the nervous system into the central nervous system, which contains the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which contains all of the nerves that extend out from the spinal cord all over the body. The peripheral nervous system can be split into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system includes the nerves that control skeletal muscle. These nerves are under voluntary control. In contrast, the autonomic nervous system controls involuntary targets such as cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and different glands. The autonomic nervous system can be further split into the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic nervous system controls the body's response to threats, which is why we sometimes call it the fight or flight response. It does things like dilate pupils, increase heartbeat, and stimulate production of adrenaline. The parasympathetic system works in opposition to the sympathetic nervous system. It controls the body during homeostasis. We call it the rest and digest system because it does things like slow the heartbeat, constrict blood vessels, and stimulate digestive activity. Nervous tissue is made of nerve cells and their support cells called neuroglia. Nerve cells, called neurons, are the main functional units of the nervous system as they receive and send signals around the body. The main part of the neuron is called the cell body. It is where the nucleus and other organelles live. Then coming off of the cell body are multiple dendrites which receive input signals, as well as axons which send signals away from the cell body to other cells. Axons are sometimes extremely short and sometimes can reach up to 3 feet in length. Wrapped around some axons is a myelin sheath. This is basically an insulating layer that allows electrical impulses to travel down the axon extremely efficiently. The spaces between the myelin sheath on the axon are called the nodes of Ranvier. There are also a few different forms of neurons. We have the multipolar neuron, which looks like the cell most commonly recognized as a neuron. It has many processes coming from the cell body, with only one of those being the axon. Then we have bipolar neurons, which only have 2 processes. One is the axon while the other is a dendrite. Then we have unipolar neurons, which only have 1 process extending from the cell body. That one process then splits into 2 branches, but both act together like a single axon. Glia, or neuroglia, are cells of the nervous system that are not neurons and therefore don't create or conduct impulses themselves. There are satellite cells that surround the neurons and help regulate the chemical environment, Schwann cells that provide myelination to some neurons in the peripheral nervous system, oligodendrocytes which provide myelination to neurons in the central nervous system, astrocytes, which are the most abundant, link neurons to capillaries and thereby forming the blood-brain barrier. Then you have microglia that are specialized macrophages which eat bacteria and debris to protect the central nervous system, and also ependymal cells that create and secrete cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so how does the nervous system actually control our other tissues? When our neurons are not firing or conducting any signals, there is a difference in electrical charge inside the membrane of the neuron and outside the membrane. This is due to the location of sodium and potassium ions. This difference in charge is held steady and is called the resting potential. Whenever the environment changes, depending on the neuron and what signal it receives, sometimes the resting potential gets changed and the inside of the membrane gets less negative compared to the outside of the cell. Then the membrane is said to be depolarized. This can cause what we call an action potential. An action potential is the rapid changing of the membrane potential through the influx of ions. These action potentials travel down the neuron from the dendrites to the end of the axon, relaying an electrical signal. At the end of an axon is usually a synapse. A synapse is the connection between 2 neurons or the neuron and its target cell. The neurons are not physically connected, but there is a small space between them. This space is called the synaptic cleft. When the action potential gets to the end of the axon, it stimulates the release of chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. An example of a common neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. These chemical messengers travel across the space and bind to the other neuron, causing it to depolarize and start another action potential. The brain can be thought of as the main control center of the nervous system, and therefore the body as a whole. It contains over 100 billion neurons, equipping it to process large amounts of sensory information and control multiple complex processes all at once. The spinal cord is the main nerve column that goes from the brain down through the vertebral column. It is split into multiple parts, and 31 pairs of spinal nerves extend out from the spinal column to the rest of the body. The top section, called the cervical nerves, control things like breathing, heart rate, and head, neck, and shoulder movements. The thoracic nerves control things like muscle tone, temperature regulation, and trunk stability. The lumbar nerves control hips, knees, and feet, and the sacral nerves at the bottom control bowel and bladder activity. This overview just scratches the surface of the nervous system and is only meant to be a quick review or summary. To learn more in detail about the nervous system and many other science topics, make sure you subscribe to this channel by clicking the red subscribe button directly below. Also, if you learned anything in this video or it was a helpful review, quickly tap the thumbs up button. As always, leave any questions or comments below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for joining, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of those science videos.